Welcome to the From Foster to Blank podcast, where we're highlighting former foster youth who have discovered their passion in life and creating their own purpose by redefining what success means to them. It's almost like a Where Are They Now podcast. Within every single story, we will see different people highlight what inspired them to change the direction of their life and how they achieve their own goals by redefining what success is. The best part is everyone is going to have a different definition of what success is, and we get to learn from them. The other neat part is that every single one of these people are going to highlight what they do, and they're going to give advice on how they got there. This is an educational podcast for people that are like you and me, foster care kids, but we're going to see it from a different lens of positivity. So here we go.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the From Foster to Blank podcast. I am so excited to have my new friend Kristen here, and we're going to just dig in and she's going to answer the questions and we're just going to learn from her. So tell me a little bit about what you do.
Sure. I am a foster adoptive mom, and I'm in grad school to be a licensed counselor. And I currently work for a nonprofit that serves kids in many different ways. And I'm an educational therapist right now with them, but I hope to be working as a child therapist really soon.
I love it. Okay, so you're a foster adoptive mom and working on getting your license to be a counselor, therapist, not a like. I feel like there's okay. Let's talk about a little bit about the difference between what a counselor is and a therapist is, because I feel like there is a difference in some things.
I have no idea. I thought they were interchangeable. Maybe I'm mental health counselor, I guess, is the license.
Okay.
Yeah, I think some may have more like a specific maybe modality or maybe see a certain type of client, but yeah, I think they're interchangeable.
Okay. Because sometimes I feel like some people are like, well, no, like I'm seeing a counselor, but like not a therapist. And I'm like, okay, what kind of counselor are you talking about?
Yeah. Maybe smarter followers that you have can teach us.
I don't know. My PhD is in psychology, and sometimes I'm like, I don't know, like maybe they're needing just a different type of person, like a counselor for like planning classes or something, or like someone who's just like a mentor. I don't know, but I've heard some people ask that, so I was like, I need to know.
Oh my gosh, you got your PhD?
I did.
How did you not die? Like, I was looking at some of the informational stuff.
I cried.
I'm like, if I could just go to get my PhD and not have to write any more papers, solid. But I have a feeling that's all it is. Like,
it kind of is. One of the misconceptions is that the dissertation is just a big paper, and it's not. It's actually research. So you have to learn how to take all the information you're learning, put it into your own words, cite it to make sure it's accurate. Like, you can't give your opinion or fluff writing, which I'm like, I love creative writing, and they're like, take it out, and I'm like, what? But then you have to do your own, like your real own research. So I had to do interviews and my questionnaire, like create my own questions for my questionnaire, get them tested, make sure that they were going to work. It was a lot of work, but it was a lot. Like, I realized in that moment that I'm a research person, and I'm a person who's more of like, I like seeing information and being like, okay, this is why we do what we do. And I love relational, but I don't want to be, I've always kind of had that hard time. This is gonna sound really sad. Sometimes I'm just like, get over your crap. Like I'm the kind of person who's like, just get over it. But in the sense of like, when someone's really ridiculous and you're just like, you stubbed your toe and it's months, like, get over it. Like, just stop limping. But I can't.
So you're more high structure with some understanding and nurture.
Oh, absolutely. But I'm definitely like, let me just go on the research side, because this is not going to work well for people who need like,
oh my goodness,
need to be able to process.
Well, thankful for you.
It's hard.
Yeah, we need both. Absolutely.
Yeah, we do.
And do you even know any statistics around how many foster youth make it to their PhD?
So it's a very, very,
I think it was like
very low number.
0.5% of each
It's less than
that.
So they've said, so statistically, we know that 3% graduate with an associate's or a bachelor's. Master's degree, I think it is 0.5% nationally, and it was like 0.0001. There's very few. There are people, I've met a few people, but it's like, if we're standing in a room, there's probably, of all educated people, there's probably maybe two of us. And that's kind of hard to know. And the biggest reasons why I actually did all of my research on this from a school standpoint.
No way. Okay.
So it was on the best practices for foster youth support programs in my state of California. And
Right.
A lot of the research just shows that foster youth are not even graduating with a bachelor's because of financial, emotional, and academic support that's lacking. So these support programs are trying to help with that, to try to help kind of cope with walking through that and helping them like figure out ways to bring the finances in if they need it, or bring in ways to help them emotionally. But it really comes down to most foster youth are deciding if they're going to go to college by the 8th grade. And then there's a negative stigma around going to community college that in general. So people are like, oh, it's not as smart. It's like, that's not true. But and homelessness is high among foster youth within college as well, because they lose housing and community colleges don't have housing. So it was eye-opening to see how much we had done since I was in community college, but it was also really disheartening because there wasn't that much there was not much where
absolutely.
That's
hard.
Crazy.
Everyone
says that.
When I aged out, there was the NC Reach, like a Orphan Foundation America scholarship that I was able to get that covered most of it, but it didn't cover housing, right? And so that was definitely a huge barrier that I had to overcome. So I definitely hear that. I love that there are a lot of programs that seem to be popping up that really are starting to fill some of those gaps.
Absolutely.
But definitely so much further to go if there's only 0.5%. Like that's just insane.
And that's just for master's programs, like foster youth being able to go further than a bachelor's. And then it's just like to know that like
and there's no scholarships.
No,
like I've gotten one scholarship for my master's, so I'm gonna be paying off student loans for
and masters
a long
and
time.
PhDs, like masters have some scholarships, PhDs do not have any. So it's all loan based. You could try to get like a grant from the government for your dissertation, but like that doesn't help until you're in your dissertation phase. So that was eye-opening. Like there are ways to, like, if people want to know, I have found ways to help pay for school, and it was by working at the schools that you attend, but you have to work at that school or find a job that does like tuition reimbursement. But if people have other questions, they can ask me, because I'm like, I found things, but it's so hard because it's not everywhere. I know people who work within education facilities and or education institutions, and they've said, like, there was nothing. And
Absolutely.
a lot of employers
have you heard of
tailored to your job?
Yeah, absolutely. I know there's some scholarship opportunities where I work for people who've been there, quite a while. But also, have you heard of like Dream Makers and One Simple Wish?
I've heard of that. There's a lot
They've
of
helped out with books and stuff.
Yeah.
That's
and iFoster is another great one. I love plugging them, because if you need phones or laptops, they help them get those for foster youth, because that is a big need, is that 5% of Royal School students are actually being able to have a computer for school. And this is like middle school, high school level. So it's really hard to see, like, when we know our fellow former youth or current youth are struggling with getting things like electronics to try to do homework for high school. It's like, why would you want to go to a college, even for a certification program, if you were like, what's the point of school if I'm just, too dumb to learn it? It's like, you're not, you just had a lot of things hate you. Okay, so we're going to jump into the next question. I love this. This was I love this I love it. Because we really didn't talk about the statistics when it comes to that. And this is why I think we're doing what we're doing. And one of the questions that I have is, how do you define success?
That's a great question. I definitely define it through my faith, just because it's such a huge part of who I am. My favorite verse is Matthew 22:37. And it says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, and your mind. And to me, that just means that everything that passes through my life is an overflow of what he's poured in. And that kind of, in respect, gives him the responsibility of the fruit that's in my life. And so if I'm just keeping my eyes on him and I'm doing the things that he's called me to, because it could look like really tiny things, right? But the fruit of that could be eternal and everlasting, like just rippling effect. And I've had so many cool encounters with people and with like just life in general, of things I could have never created for myself. And so I feel like even early on, like these little yeses that I gave him and things that may not seem so glamorous or like successful, right, in the world. Even like, you know, staying probably away from the wrong kinds of people and like choosing, you know, maybe some loneliness over fitting into people that I shouldn't have been, right? Those kind of turned into having influence or having communities that are really life-giving, or, you know, just volunteering. I didn't start out as a foster parent or adoptive parent. I didn't start out as somebody who speaks on stages and, you know, wants to make a big impact. I started by just being really aware of things around me and things that I really wanted to learn more about and go deeper so that God could use that knowledge and that wisdom that I couldn't obtain on my own and for his glory. So yeah, that was,
I love that,
kind of my heart. I don't see myself as somebody that's like super well known or successful. I'd love to go for my PhD. It's probably not in the cards for me, but
you never know.
Yeah. And I'm also like a really big fan of like, I think a lot of the things that I missed out on as a kid were those little moments. And so I think for me, success means just being around people and family and things that I've created that just bring my heart so much joy and fill a lot of those places. Because I know that's what makes him happy too.
Yeah, absolutely. So you said something that I don't think so in the foster care, when you're in foster care, you want to be a part of everyone, to fit in and to be involved in things, because I think that it's just all of us have some sort of, you know, self-doubt and insecurities. But you said, you know, that you didn't get involved with certain relationships or certain people or certain situations. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because I feel like a lot of the times we get stuck in like where we're not invited to or where we're not in. And so how has that changed your thinking? Like, how did that start? And then how has that changed your thinking for all of those type of relationships? Because you said it impacted you positively. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. I think one of the cruelest parts of my story was the silence. You know, like there was abuse and there was neglect early on in my story. And so I definitely wanted to fit into places. And I, with being ADHD and just, you know, energetic, like I didn't know a stranger. I would love to go and just make conversation with people at the grocery stores, right? But I started to learn early on, and I actually accepted Jesus at 5 years old. And so I've been walking with him for a long time. And I really started to see my life and even the pain and the struggles that I had through the lenses of what is it going to make him happy? Like, what is it going to move his heart? What are the things that he cares about? And most of the time it was the people that were sitting by themselves at lunch, because I was that kid too. I could hide it a little bit better. And so I think I was just able from really young age to point out the people I didn't want to become. Right. And so I think there's a fear of like, you know, I didn't want to become my parents. I didn't want to do the things they did. And so I kind of became the complete opposite by focusing on what I did want to become. And that was somebody who was inclusive and kind. And so when I did finding popularity, because I was student body vice president in high school, it was like, you know, I had a lot of people that I felt like I was well liked, you know, like people, I didn't have like enemies or anything, but it did open doors to people that I felt like were pulling me away from who I knew I was called to be, and making inclusivity like the opposite of that, right? So the people that I was going to hang out with didn't want to have inclusivity. They wanted to have elite status and like control. And yeah, and so that just like prepared my heart as I got older, even if in the midst of like school was my place to just be loved and cared for and care for others and have that reciprocation of like just connection. And so that kind of led to, once I got to high school, I ended up going to an alternative high school. Even though I was straight A's and like really good kid, there was a huge risk of me dropping out just because of the extreme challenges that I was facing that had nothing to do with me. I got introduced to a lot of really hard things really fast that I had been kind of sheltering myself from. And so taking those just root of still wanting to have my life reflect who I've just grown up to be. So that it was really hard. I'm not making light of it. It is sometimes really difficult to choose to not fit in and receive that instant gratification of belonging for something that you know is bigger than yourself. And I've God's been so faithful. There have been really big periods of my life of loneliness and of hardship. But it's almost like if I just take the smallest step forward towards community in a healthy way, it's always met me. And my life right now is a huge evidence of that. I have the most incredible people around me that are truly family.
I love that.
Yeah.
I think the hardest part too is you said it. You just were like, this is the reality, is it's the silence and the loneliness. And it's either loneliness and silence now, or when you're being directed by people to be bully or to not include people and to exclude people because of whatever reasons, you do end up being like that and you regret that, versus being like, you know what, that silence and loneliness was hard, but I was the person that I knew I wanted to be. And now, like, now you have those people around you. Now I know for myself, sometimes seasons change and people kind of change through those seasons, and that's hard. But has that helped you kind of sit in that season of, maybe it's like a new season of loneliness, or like, I wouldn't say, maybe there's a hole of a friend that kind of left. Like, does that make it not worthy or worth it, or just kind of like it matters in that moment? But like, how do you process that when that happens and a new season happens with new people?
Yeah, I think learning, like you're hitting on it too, learning that there are seasons of, and that's for everyone, not just foster youth, right? Learning that it's not just me, of people coming and going in my life. And so in foster care, there's quite often people who have really good intentions, but they way overpromise and they way underdeliver. And so you can either have your heart be hardened and closed off, or you can choose to lean in and just love people for who they can be in your life and set those expectations in your heart. And that's not something that a teenager should have to learn, or a child, or like, like that we should just be, but when you don't have a plan B, when there's not a family to fall back on, it's so hard to try to keep people in perspective of who they can be. And so that has been really challenging. And there have been seasons where I've been like, Lord, I don't have anybody. Like, this is not okay. Like, but he does sustain, and he does, like, I have never regretted staying in that secret place with him and not going for a cheap alternative, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
which is weighty. I don't want to, it's not just something like Christian-y, like it is weighty and is hard, and it is, gut wrenching sometimes, but just being able to say, like, I know your heart for me. I know this isn't forever. I know this is a season. So I'm just going to keep pushing through. And then all of a sudden the tidal wave, and even with the tidal wave, you still have to add protective barriers and be like, hey, thank you so much for saying that you want to be part of my life forever and ever. That's great. How about we start with now? Like, like, it's okay if you don't make these big promises, and it's okay if you don't want to try to fix me, because, does that make sense? Like,
yes, I'm writing like two things down.
So it is worth it.
So
it is worth it.
I feel like sometimes, and if we cry, we're fine. Right.
We will.
That's fine. That's what we do. It's human. It's good. It's good. It's good. It's good. I think you hit it kind of on the head. You said a lot of the times, specifically in the foster care community, we do overpromise and underdeliver. And I don't think it's intentional, but that hurts. It hurts so badly. So then we put our barriers up. Then we don't trust anybody. So what would your advice be to someone who has been hurt over and over and over again, when they have, shown up? Because, a lot of people will tell us, like, you just have to show up. You just have to ask. You just have to say, I'm your friend. And I've literally across the table, and this is poor me moment. I was sitting across the table, said something to someone, and they said, oh, you'll find your people. And I was like, I literally asked you to go to coffee. And you just like wow, like it hurt, but it hurts so badly. And sometimes seasons feel really long. So for someone who might be in that season right now, if they're looking for their people, they can't find their people, and they feel like they just keep getting overpromised and underdelivered, and maybe they show up well, but no one's showing up well for them, what's some advice that you can give them?
Goodness. There is a joy, and I don't want to say this lightly because it's not, but there is a joy and contentment found in communion with the Lord. And I feel like being able to have an overflow of knowing who you are and doing that work first, is so important. So seasons that I feel like have been the hardest relationally, I have grown the most in my walk with the Lord. And if you choose it, and you need to have people like a good counselor or a pastor, somebody walking through those things with you. But then once you can get from that place of there's not a desperation, and there's no shame on that, right? There's no judgment we need to put on ourselves. We're not pathetic. Like we have had true experiences that have shaped our brains, have shaped our nervous systems, have given us every reason to just get up and stay in survival mode or put the walls up. But we're not. We're choosing to keep it soft, and leaning into his, fathering and his love can be really hard process to go through, but it is necessary in order to ride these unique waves that maybe not everyone understands.
Absolutely.
Second, I think I've never regretted, increasing my language around what I need. So like understanding my self-worth, understanding what it is that I can ask for from people. I think I have some friends right now that they don't have a lot of capacity. And so I'll be like, hey, like, it would be really great. It would fill me up a lot if I could just come over and hang out with your family, and you don't have to entertain me. You don't have to I just get to blend in and be part, and don't have to think about when I'm going to leave, or if I'm overstaying, or if I'm, you don't have to get up and get me anything, just let me be somewhere. And that has been one of the most healing things I've ever allowed myself to ask for. And that organically allows you to keep learning, because I feel like, and this is sad, but we all have a line of what's too much, right? In relationship. And we rarely have the awareness to know where that line is. And so as foster youth, I feel like it's been really weighty to try to figure that line for other people instead of just asking them, hey, what is your line, right? Because people, they want to go deep and they want to know your story, but sometimes they don't understand all that comes with that. And and people can have very low tolerance, and they don't even know it until they're in a situation and they're like, whoa, we didn't sign up for all this. And you're like, I just told you my mom died, it's not a big
deal. It's fine. I'm fine. I've been
and I answered. So I think learning to be better humans is learning to be more self-aware.
Sadie Robertson, she is one of my favorite people to follow, but she said something that hit me to my core. And I have cried to my husband. Let's be real. I always get those really weird seasons. I'm going to be honest. I've gotten into those really hard seasons where I don't feel like people are showing up. And then I do reach out, and it is kind of that, I am verbal. I've changed my language, but I think you said increase your language, not change your language, but increase your language to express what you're needing. And I think sometimes what we do in our dark moment is we go, I just feel like I haven't seen anybody in a long time. I just don't feel like I'm connected, versus what you said was, I know that you might not have the capacity to go out and hear me tell you my story, but I just want to kind of be around people right now. Would it be okay if I just come and sit in your room? I'll bring my own food.
Play with your kids.
We're just here, but I just need to be, I want to be in the presence of someone, just to be. And I think that when we increase that language, it changes how we communicate. And Sadie Robinson said something to the effect of, when we meet a new friend, we try to treat them like someone who we've known for 12 years. And so we kind of just tell them all of our stuff, and they might not be, like you said, able to process that because it's so much. And we didn't get to our 12-year friendship with someone else, overnight. It took time. And that's where that pull is, that struggle that we have is
so good.
Time. And we have to give them that time. And I think I've done that so many times where I'm just like, word vomit, here's my problems. And I'm like, I'm fine. I'm not crying.
Or God forbid they share something that they've been through. And then you're like, nope, don't say it. Don't say it.
Yes. And you're like,
where do we bring this in?
When do we talk about it? And I did this on my first date with my husband, where I was just like, look, here's my life. I'm working with my siblings. If you're not down, they not gonna work. It's just not gonna work. And he's like, awesome. Here's my story. And I was like, sweet. We can keep talking.
Trauma bonding. First date.
It wasn't even really trauma bonding. for the sense of like one up each other's trauma, but it was really just like, you know, he was working at a church and he had been divorced. And so there was a lot of protection he was trying to give himself and his family because of what had happened. And I'm like, I have kids now and I'm trying to protect them. I had just gotten out of a relationship like 6 or 8 months prior. And I was like, I don't want someone who's going to lead me on for 3 years. So if that is what you're just, and I had been on a couple dates. So I'm kind of like at this point, like, if you don't want to date seriously, that's fine. But I'm just not, I have kids. Like I ain't going to run them through this hell of just, here's another guy, you know? And that was more of like, I think a boundary setting where it was just like, if you're here to play games for both, but on both sides, we're like, if you're here to play games, it's just not for us, you know? It was
I hear you. It's so funny.
But it was a lot.
Yeah.
And he didn't run. I mean, we're married now.
How long have you been married?
5 years, but we've been together for 6. So this June 29th, it'll be 5 years married. But I think you change that verbiage where it's like, increase your language and don't just trauma dump on someone and then just be like, it's fine. My mom died. Like, it's totally fine. Like, I'm good. And they're not good though. They have to process this. This is just hard when it comes to, I think it's a part of us just wanting to be like, how much can you handle? And are you going to versus kind of like just kind of little like I've been through a lot and maybe you're not at the capacity to take on my trauma. And some of that's where we need to go to a therapist on and like talk through them because they'll be able to handle that. Most of the time I've had counselors who have cried because of my story and they're just like, I can't handle this. And I'm like, oh my God. Oh, what did I do? I broke my counselor. Nobody talks about that, but let's be real. Like I'm
like, I'm gonna need you to stop sobbing now because
it's like okay, anyone listening for real, you can be a counselor. So just like slowly with friendships too. And I think that's why I kind of want to like pause where it's like, are we, there's 2 questions I have. Are we trauma vomiting on someone so that we can continue saying no one can show up for me? Because I have been that person who I purposely am like, let me see how much they'll handle. And if they'll walk away and it's like, I've known them for 3 weeks, probably not a good idea. Or are we not being in the moment of being able to increase our language to really help people understand where we're at because we're afraid of getting hurt again? Instead of using our language, maybe we're just saying, well, I'm telling people I'm not feeling good, but I'm not telling them what I need. People can't read our minds. It's fast.
That's true. Fast. I think something too, it's really hard for people to not make assumptions. I think that was one of the hardest things that I walked through because I actually kind of more the opposite. You know, I think I haven't really started sharing my story until a couple of years ago. And there were people that I've known for 20 years, even in high school, that didn't even know I was in foster care, right? Like I really struggled because when people would start to see even remotely any behaviors out of me, like self-harm or running away, they mainly would just go to attention seeking or she's, you know, when they don't know I've been self-harming for 5 years, like just now people are, you know, and I think it's been really hard in our communities that have very little understanding of being trauma informed and also, you know, what foster care is like. And so there's just so many assumptions, which have really shut me down. But I also think that when I meet someone, I'm kind of like, hey, I kind of need you to know that there are some different things about me that I really value this friendship. And I noticed that you're feeling a little uneasy about some things. Why don't we just have an open conversation? You ask me what you want to know, but I have the right to say, hey, not yet. Or does that make sense? Like,
absolutely.
I've had so many of those conversations in the last couple of years, and they're way less awkward than what we build ourselves in our heads, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like it even makes people feel more at ease knowing, you know, because I don't like hugs. I don't like when people come up out of nowhere and just like touch me, you know? And I have a very touchy-feely community. And so instead of me jumping and making you feel awkward, like, hey, like this is just a part of my story and why I don't like touch and I don't like hugs. Are we cool with that? And they're like, yeah. And then even one person was like, okay, so how do we show up with love for you? I'm like, randomly show up with boba. Like that is the great way to my heart. Like,
you have a dollar bill attached to your demands.
Yeah.
Boba, I've never tried it, so I can't say if it's good or not, but I've never tried boba. Okay, I have a
girl, so
thing. I can't do textures. So like even like strawberries in a drink, I'm like, no.
Okay, boba's not for you. Never mind.
No. So that's why
it's all about textures.
I'm good. I don't like floaties in a drink.
I want to go back really quickly. There's something you said about with your husband. So fun fact, I actually adopted a teenager. She came from my home at 16 and she's actually 20 now and I'm 31. So there's not very much difference. And so I was recently on a date with a guy and I was like, hey, like there's something you need to know. Like, what date do I bring up that I have a daughter who's almost a junior in college?
First date.
Yeah.
Like, and honestly, it's not trauma. Like I do want to say this is because I think there are a lot look, like if you were a single parent, foster or not, you have to be honest that you have kids. And you're not saying, again, I did not go in the details of my story and like, this is the abuse I went through. Here's the levels of abuse. I just said, look, I have kids and I'm not here to just date around. I'm not looking for just someone to have on my arm. Like I really would I date with the intention of looking for someone to marry and do life with. But I understand that having teenagers and then 2 young adults in my house, that's 5 people that I have and responsibility is a lot.
Yeah.
I'm not asking you, and I said I'm not asking you to come in and be their dad. I'm not asking you to come in and be their brother-in-law right now. I'm just saying, are you okay with dating a single mother who is a sister mom? Because that sounds weird when I say sister mom. We call it a sis mom in our family. Yeah. And a broda for a brother, broda. But I just said, like, I'm not here to play around. And I have been on dates where, 3-4 dates in, and I'm just like, hey, okay, I'm gonna let you know, like, I do have kids, and they're my siblings and this, that, and I'm not gonna shy away what this person said. They said, well, if this ever goes further into a real relationship, you would have to choose between me or them. And I was like, what? And my husband was just like, if I were to go into this relationship with you, I would want to try to help you. I would want to try to be there with you.
Absolutely.
If I were to, and I just said, I was like, FYI, I think it was like maybe the 4th date, but I was like, if I would die, and
so you were sharing with more of like the intention of setting expectations.
Absolutely.
So you were like, what you need, what.
Absolutely. And I was like, I'm not looking for someone to help me drive them around or take care of them or give me money. I'm looking for someone to love and support me. And I said, but here's the deal, is the emotions that come with parenting are rough. So I might have a bad day where I'm just like, hey, I have to cancel our date tonight. And I need that understanding from you to understand that this is not a personal thing against you. It's just, that is my plate at home. I work, I'm in my master's program at that point. Like I have a lot happening, but I do want to show up well for you as well. So if I'm not doing that, and that's not what you want, like, that's a reality. And
let me know now.
Let me know now. Because there were people like I had, that was actually like the previous relationship where it was like, he did have kids. And then he goes, well, I didn't sign up with you having kids. And I'm like, okay, well then bye. Like that ended. It's like, well, it's okay for me too, but that's not what I signed up for. And it's like, that's fine. You have that right to go. But I need to know up front with when I started dating again, it was that whole like, a whole weird conversation. Like you'll have to choose between me and them. They'll move out. Like, we'll wait till they're all like they won't, like not good boundaries.
Right.
It was more,
which is not what you say to a former foster youth who like permanency and like forever. Like even my daughter's 20, she can come home whenever she needs to, like we're in it for life. Like
if they can't handle that we have responsibilities of children, they're not going to be able to handle the trauma and where it will come into the relationship. And so that was kind of where I felt, I look back on it now and I knew where my breaking point was. And it was because I had gone on one date with somebody and that's what they basically told me. Like, if this were to go forward, like you would have to figure out a way to get rid of them. And I'm like, not I'm like,
this isn't turning into a true crime show, man.
very confused. And I was just like, and I was like, okay, so I'm just going to be upfront and like blunt. And we're not playing games. And I was so more of it irritated. Like, if this isn't what you want, out. Like, you say you're a Christian guy, you say that you understand. And he goes, you know, at that point we were 28. And he said, you know, I figured, you know, that he goes, people didn't like that he was divorced and didn't really want to hear what happened. But he said, you know, I figured I would end up with a mom with kids. And so he's like, here we are. Like, okay, this is just part of it. But we got to know each other, and now we're 33, and my youngest, well, I have an 8-month-old now, but my brother is 20 years old. He still lives with us. But you know, we have one, and that has always been a part of like our life and our story. Is like, he came in and he started being, you know, their brother-in-law, but then like also helping me where we needed and being a partner with me. And it was very different, but it came back to that like blunt honesty of like, these are the things I have to state. And if you're not willing to take this on, then we're not pursuing a relationship. Because if you can't just saying that I have responsibilities, you're not going to be able to handle it. So it's dating advice,
because you want to run with someone, not in like friction. Like,
absolutely,
you're like, I want to make this even better. And it sounds like your husband did. He came in and he made your parenting better.
It did. And it was like that.
That's God's
absolutely. But it's
so encouraging.
That also happens with relationships. And that's where I think my relationships that are the best is kind of like, here's where I'm at. Not here's all my trauma, but here's where I'm at. This is what I'm looking for. And if that's not where your season is, that's okay. But I still love you. And I'm still here for you. I love language.
I love, oh, sorry.
No, you're good. Go ahead. Go for it.
It's a Yolam. Gosh, The Gift of Therapy. It's a book. And it's like this concept in therapy about this here and now, like check-ins, like we can also like normalize checking in our friendships. Like, hey, is this working? Is this not working? Like, can we just our friendship just take a break right now in this like busy season where it just looks different? Like, so okay. And I think for foster youth that can be really scary. But if we're like increasing our language, then there's almost, I feel like it is more traumatic for me to have incongruency in someone than from someone to say no. Like, if I asked or if I pursued a relationship and they said no, that feels safer for them than just to fake it and overpromise and like and burn me later. Does that make sense?
There's more hurt in the dragging it out and just being like, look, just tell me no. And people are like, I just don't want to hurt you. And I'm like, I would rather you hurt me with a no than continuously hurt me with the lies, the moving of, well, I just be honest. It's actually Bianca. Her name's Bianca Alf. So she does If Gathering. If you haven't followed her on Instagram, we always follow everybody. We know everybody. But she said, like, she was talking about, she was doing a sermon on relationships. And one of the things that she said is like, sometimes you just have to come to the friendship and just be like, hey, where are we at? Is this working? Because it's not a good thing to keep putting off those things. And it is okay to be like, there's a difference. And I want to say this to make it clear. There is a difference to say your friendship isn't giving me what I want financially, emotionally, spiritually, physically. Like, you're just not showing up for me because I want you to drop everything and come do whatever I want to do. That's not what we're talking about. That's not good. That's kind of a
codependent.
That's you serve me. Like, we're not talking about that. What we're talking about is when you're in a relationship, friendship with someone, and you're talking about kind of where your needs are, and you are the person always showing up, and then they're taking, but they're not giving back. And you're just like, hey, like, if you're in a season of just not being able to do that, that's okay. Just be honest with me. And that's where, you know, there are times where it's like, if they're going to say, I'm never going to show up for you, it's time to cut it. And that's what I was talking about, is just like, there are times that you have to cut a relationship. And it's not because they're a bad person, but maybe just maybe we bring out the worst in each other. And maybe, or maybe that person is self-serving and they're just like, I want to use everybody. And I've been in friendships like that, but you said something where you said that when you are being able to describe what you want, versus desperation to just get anybody. There is that understanding that it's like, I need to describe and know what I want so that I don't become desperate for just anything. And I think that desperation of just wanting people leads us to bad relationships and friendships. So
Absolutely.
when it comes to what desperation looks like, because I think sometimes I look at that and I'm like, I'm coming off as desperate because I'm asking someone a question. What is desperate? You define that. What does that look like for, like, if someone was looking at if they're being desperate or not for a friendship?
Yeah. I have a friend that I like, kind of like what you said. I'm the only one that pursues in the relationship. I'm always asking to hang out. I'm always texting. I'm always being thoughtful, remembering birthdays, and they're just not. And so that desperation to hold on, because there's a really great history with this friend. There was a season where we were both reciprocating and really clicking. And I think because she knows my story, it was really hard for her to say, like, hey, I have moved on in a different city, in a different situation. Like this is where my focus and my heart is. It doesn't mean I don't care about you. It just means that I don't have as much energy and time to pour in the way I used to. And I'm holding on to, no, I can't lose you because we have that really long friendship. Instead of being able to mold to what it is, I'm trying to hold on to what was. And so thankfully a really healthy conversation happened and we were able to still remain friends. And now I get to just love her for who she is and she loves me. And yeah, it's been beautiful. And it's been hard to lose that. But I think there was so much rejection and so much just loss in my life. It's been really hard in seasons to not hold on to people that have shown me kindness or have been a safe place for me in the past. Of realizing that those people are recreatable in what God has for me. And I'm actually disservicing myself by not moving forward with the people who are wanting to run with me in this season, even if it's not forever. So it's just an example of what it's like.
I love that, because I think sometimes we do hold on for too long. And you said, I was holding on to what was and who we were, not who we are. And according to, and I pulled it up because I wanted to make sure I say the right person, but NPR.org, they have an article about how we change every 10 years biologically. Like in our body, we change psychologically in our body, and our thinking and our way of being is we change. And when, by the time we're 30, we've changed again from who we were in our 20s. And that is something I think is really hard to come to grip with, we can't accept
something.
Because it's hard when we have that great relationship for so long and then it's just not. But when we realize that people change and we allow people to change, it becomes beautiful. And you said that where you're beautiful now that we've had this conversation. It's beautiful friendship because we're accepting each other with where we're at, not where we are. Me at 20 is very different than me at 30. Me 30 is different at 33. But if someone was coming into a friendship, like this is where it's kind of hard to, meet up with old friends, is people I knew in high school are not, how I know them in high school isn't who I know today. So, and that's where, like, a lot of people who grow up in churches, it's really hard to, they can't, it's hard to stay in the same congregation with the same adults, because the adults are like, no, this is who I know. That's not the person I know. That's not the Denisha I know. That's not the, Kristen, or Sarah I know, or whatever. And it's like, this is who I know you as. And then when you go to change, they're like, why are you changing? And it's like, this is not a bad change, it's a good change. But,
it's a good change.
Great change. And I think it's hard when we look at an old friendship and say, well, that's who we were. And so when we let go, that's who we get to see in front of us and say, oh, you have changed. You have grown, you have changed in your thinking, you have changed in the way that you act, in your needs have changed. And if I accept you for you standing in front of me, I can love you better than who you were. I can love you now. And that I love that you said that, like, it's beautiful now, not because you had the conversation, but because you accepted and said, this is where we both are at. These are what our needs are. let me walk into that with that knowledge and say, okay, now I can accept you with what you need and want and desire versus forcing you to be who you were. And that hits.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Okay. So
good.
I love, 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 love. So you're defining success with your relations through your faith, and your faith is those moments where you're able to say, here's my boundary. Now, this is a question that I have, because I know we all get this. Within the foster care community, do we all know each other? Every time someone's like, oh, you're foster care? Do you know so-and-so? I'm like, no. But it's, I think within the foster care community, how can we show up better for people that we might not know? Just because we tend to we do trauma bond. We're like, you're in foster care, we assume that person has the same story as us. So well for foster care without trauma bonding, because that's not a good, can you actually explain what trauma bonding is for people who might not know, and then go into why that's not a good foundation?
From my understanding, not from a clinical perspective, because it's not something that we've covered, right? That's just from what I understand in some of the circles that I've not wanted to be a part of, right? I think it's when two people who really don't know each other very well are really creating a deep connection based on some of the really hard things that they've gone through. And so I feel like it can be, I guess, somewhat of a positive thing if it's like in let's say like a group therapy session, like you're really finding safety in what other people have gone through, but there needs to be a healthy perspective of that not being the only thing you see about that person, and making sure that the dynamics aren't going into just dumping on each other, and not maybe finding some healthy boundaries in that. If that makes sense. So we're not like meshing with someone based on just what they've been through.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think there's some, and you can feel it. It's like a heavy thing, right? If you're with someone and you're sharing a part of like your story because you've been asked or you're talking, and then they start going to this darker place, and then you're just like, I can either go there because it sometimes feels nice, but I don't know this person. There's not a safety net there. I don't know what they carry or what their perspectives are, and I could do a lot of damage to them if I don't restrain. So I think it's just about healthy boundaries in when you're sharing things like that. And I've learned over the years, like if I start to feel that little ick or that little like nudge from the Holy Spirit, like, oh, okay, this person is not in a place, like it's going to go bad. And then you might find yourself in a really, someone's sharing something really serious with you, and you're now involved in something that, wasn't what you signed up for.
And I think, yes, because I think we need to talk about this, because I think within the trauma bonding experience, it's like we both can say we're in foster care, or we're in foster care, and we've been in the community for a while. That's a bond where it's like, oh my gosh, like you know what this is like. Now, if I were to take it to that next level, I have seen the way trauma bonding can happen in a dangerous way, where it's like, here's my trauma. Well, here's my trauma. And then it's called trauma upping. A friend of mine said it's called trauma upping, where it's like, I went through this, and then I went through that. And then I went and like you said, you're going into this dark place where it's, you're not really standing with that person to show up for them well. And so
you're in it for yourself.
You really are. And it sometimes it feels good to sit there and share about your trauma, but it's not to like, oh my God, you understand me. It's, oh, I had it worse than you. And that's where trauma bonding to a dangerous place, because then it's then, and then there's the opposite where, we could say we both have anxiety, and then it's pushing that anxiety up every single time. And then it's like, oh, I'm having an anxiety attack, and like, really getting help, except for
or you're putting them in a space that's really dangerous.
Absolutely. And there are a lot of people, and I feel this is where, and I tell this to everybody, like when they are like, come share your story. And I said, I will not be going into the details of my story, and to protect myself. But also to protect everyone listening in the room, because if you've gone through trauma, all I have to say is we've gone through stuff in our life, and people are already spiraling. But if I start going into that level of detail, you're right, that there's that dangerous place that I take them to say, okay, relive in this moment everything you've gone through, and then I'm letting them free out of the room like little birds.
Yeah.
Those little birds are going, oh my gosh. And they're
Right.
in depression, anxiety, sometimes self-harm.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I love that you said that, because it's like, yes, we can't go there. We need to recognize and go, ooh,
Yeah.
gut punch.
Yeah.
And feeling that thing that says this is not going to end well, or maybe this
Yeah.
person wants to take me to my trauma. And I've met someone who was like this, where they for them it was I don't want to say this weird or gross, but it was something that they desired and liked, where they liked when people told them their trauma, and then they would one up them, and like they would leave superior to everybody else and be like, oh, I had it the worst. So when they found out my story, it was like, oh, we can't be friends. And like, then rumors started, and it was like, oh, because you're the one story in the room. I don't care about having that title, but that's honestly that it can happen. Is, you know, maybe that gut punch is telling you, hey, don't share, because one, maybe the person's not trustworthy, or two, because it's just gonna become trauma upping. And you don't want to go down that route, because it doesn't help anybody in the room to trauma up. And trauma upping can be very dangerous. So I like that you brought that up, because I don't think we talk about that enough.
I think a slippery slope for me is, I love dark humor when it's appropriate. You know, there's lines you can cross. But there's a lot of things to make fun of in the foster care community, right? And there's some dark humor that can bring, and I think when we get into that mode, then people are like really opening up wounds that they haven't opened up with, because they feel like you're a safe person. And then, as you said, you're just leaving them. And it's like, that's the opposite of what therapy is. Like, you're coming in and you're creating space and buffers and almost like a bubble of like coping mechanisms and grounding and like tolerance windows, right? And you're just leaving people raw, and it's just not, it's not healthy. And it's not who we should strive to be in this community.
Absolutely.
Like it does happen in this community. And so, and when people ask me to come speak, I've never felt pressured. One time someone pulled me on stage and asked, okay, well, you own your own house, you're in grad school, you have an adoptive daughter. Okay, so all the foster parents in here, what do they have to do with their kids to make them successful? And I'm just like you're not holding space for all of me. Don't put me on a pedestal, because even if there are some things that are going really well in my life, you're not actually holding space for the hard stuff. Absolutely. So I think it's a balance, right? Like, we need the space to say, hey, these are some gaps that the system didn't fill, the foster parents didn't fill. We need support in these areas, but don't, we're not going to trigger each other for the sake of that.
We also need to recognize in the foster
an emotional story.
And I've had that same question, like, how do I make like almost anger question, how do I make them like you? And I'm like, you don't, because we're all different, and we all need to be different. If they want to go get a PhD, fine, whatever. They want to go get a master's, cool, whatever. They want to be emotionally okay, that's on them. But here's the deal, like, that's not my title is not the my healing is. And that's why foster to blank concept that I'm like pushing, like, yo, like, we have different definitions of success, we have different stories, different outcomes, and they're just as good as a title of a PhD or a president of the United States or whatever. Like, your title means nothing. You're healing everything. And if you, like you said, if you can't show up for the really hard stuff, you can't show up for their rewards, because you're always going to say, well, you're not like so-and-so, you're not doing look what they did and this and that. And it's like, what if we stopped that narrative and said, you went to counseling today and you opened up for the first time? That's a huge win. That's a huge win. You showed up and you got a C on that quiz. Did you know the last time when you took that, you got an F? Like, now you have a C. But stop looking at your successes as good things. And that's why I love that. How do you define success? Because I think that changes the narrative. 100%. And then I've literally been told, like, why should I listen to you? You have to tell me the trauma and the details of your trauma for me to trust you. And I'm like, we are not trauma bonding. No happens. We trauma bond over trauma. But it is so true that we don't. I like that you said that. Like, no.
And I think there's also a balance of like needing to raise funds to do good work. There's a need to bring emotions in in order to move people. And I've sat in a good service, and sometimes if you can make me laugh and cry, I'm probably going to walk away hearing really what you've said more.
Oh yeah.
But at the same time, at the risk of what, right? I've gotten on stages and I've shared, outlines of my story before. But yeah, it is something I'm really important of. Just what are we leaving for the generation behind us? What are they going to have to up in order to be in these spaces and have their voices heard, but it's with dignity and respect? It's up to us to kind of set the stage for that, for sure.
Absolutely. So. And that comes into like, again, and I know I'm going to probably emphasize this almost on every podcast, but we need to pay foster youth. We need to stop asking people to do things for free, especially when you're making your organization about foster youth. You have to pay who you're bringing in. And I think that that's really hard for people. It's like, you should not, first off, you don't require them to share what they don't want to share. The second thing is pay them for their expertise, because they are sharing their story, and that's an expert eyewitness to what it's like to go through. Foster care is messy. And if we want to really change it for the next generation, why can't we get someone who is at 16 saying, hey, these are the things that are not working and I want them to be better. But what we do is we focus foster care only on, when it comes to sharing stories, a lot of it is like, come share your success or heartbreak, and come share why it's so important to have a good parent in front of you. And it's like, what if we just kind of like hit the nail on the head and said, hey, you're showing up because you have a passion for foster care. What does that look like for you to show up well, and just to help guide that person through whatever they're looking at?
That's so good.
That's it.
But
I've had questions come from parents of just like, well, you've gone through it, you've been the guardian, you've been the foster care kid, so how do I make them successful? And I'm like, what define success for me first? And second, well, how do I get them to do what I want? And I'm like, can we just be honest? They're being a normal teenager. They're being a normal young adult. They just have a lot of
beating the statistics is not success.
No,
like,
but we
I want that to be rearranged. Like, the statistics are something that we aimed to beat, and it's ridiculous because there's so much nuance in trauma. And like, I don't know what you feel about the word resiliency, but for me, it's like, when you can overcome something with the right amount of support and it's obtainable to overcome, that's what builds resiliency. Trauma destroys, trauma tears down. And when you see someone being strong, it's because they're choosing courage to stay, like, just show up, or they're masking, right?
Absolutely.
Sorry.
And no,
I'm a little passionate about that.
I love it, because like, this is where, and I have a conversation about this a lot, is where we can't use trauma as motivation. People say it all the time, is like, well, you proved them wrong. Look at how they lit your fire. And I'm like, no, they destroyed me. I had to get back up from that dark place and decide if I was going to stand up and say, okay. But when we are looking at statistics, we are always looking at the success stories and saying, like, let's make everyone like this. But I'm like, if you looked at the child or young adult standing right in front of you and said, what is your desire? They're not going to say, be president of the United States. They're going to say, to wake up tomorrow and not feel depressed. To wake up tomorrow and wish my family was
and belong.
And belong. And be loved. And stop
have a normal day.
Have a normal day. And you're right, that trauma destroys resiliency. It destroys motivation. It destroys self-esteem. And so when we look up and say, you know what, generation that's coming behind us, first off, we're sorry that you have to experience foster care. That was not what we want. That's not something we want you to follow me along with. But what we want is to see the different facets of success, the different facets of healing, the different just everything, where it's like, you can be anything you want to be, and that's a good thing. And we want that for you. But when we don't do that, that's where we kind of don't help them succeed.
Absolutely.
And you did say that you said it, you are you, like, you are you. We're not going to try to change you, but in the community, I think a lot of the times we try to change everybody. And if we could get rid of the statistics and just say, okay, here's the reality. Yeah, that's 3%. Congratulations. But if we look at you and say, hey, by the way, did you know that what you're feeling as a normal teenager? You pushing back on me, there's some trauma behind there. Let's be real. There's trauma responses. That is a response to what has happened. But what you're feeling when you're just like, oh, like my siblings did that. And I was like, that's normal behavior. So when you're with friends, teenagers, and you're like, oh, that's normal that they don't want to clean their room. But the trauma behind why they have to clean their room is because we're afraid that CPS is going to come in and be like, hey, why is their room not spotless? And that's our issue, not the kids' issue. Like, they can have a dirty room now, not crazy.
Oh yeah, we could talk all day about control and behavior modification, but
absolutely. And that's what we go to. And but there was someone who said something where they were like, it was when I was having a rough time with my siblings, and they go, Denisha, they're just normal behaviors, but you're looking at it in the lens of trauma, and you're looking at it that there's something stemming it. And if you let go and give them responsibility, you will see that a normal 17-year-old who acts out like this is not going to have the fear of other things happening because they acted out. So that, yes, there is some responses that are more on the trauma side. There's more stuff on that where it's response to their environment. But then there's just this normal behavior that's called being a young adult. And I was like, well, I learned, but I don't think we recognize that in the foster care community. If we have someone, yes, I understand that there's drug use and there's other issues happening. But would we put the same thing on a teenager who is not in the foster care system? And the answer has always been no. So it's like, how do we change?
My daughter. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
My daughter came to me with some quirks, right? Some things that were, we couldn't fully figure out. My daughter is high functioning autistic and spent 16, 17 years in the foster care system without being diagnosed. And she's high functioning, but she is autistic.
Oh my God.
And so getting that diagnosis, because her social workers and her therapists and it was amazing how much they had looped her into all these deep-seated trauma, trying so hard to it was crazy.
That's
so we need to normalize, if you're saying normal behavior, but also too, are we leading with curiosity? Are we leading with shame and control? Are we trying so hard to make these kids into what we think they should be, other than just really leading into what's going to empower them to build a life that they're worthy of and they want to create, because it's going to look so different than us, and giving them and filling the gaps, high quality creative healthcare, mental health care. I had a kid come from my home almost completely nonverbal. And he was 7 years old, had an IEP, couldn't read. It literally took drum lessons and equine therapy to get him to be the point where he could actually tell stories through music about what he's been through, right? We kind of do this one size fits all, and we lack curiosity in the system. And we just have kids like that just literally just get put as bad kids, or, abrasive or hard to place kids. And I don't know, it just frustrates me. I was an IFT foster parent, so I was above therapeutics. So I could kids that were stepping down or stepping into long-term hospitalizations. And it was heartbreaking. And it also gave me so much grace for my own story, for the minor behaviors that I thought that were so big and I was treated so horribly for, were truly just something that should have been given curiosity and care for. So
that's some
hard, but it's good.
That's something. Because because it's normally what we call it is we're like, well, people are leading with their statistics. And that was something that happened with my high school counselor, where he's just like, oh, your foster care, oh, your parents are going through crap, oh, I'm just not gonna waste my time on you, I'm not wasting my breath, bye-bye, see you later. But he led with statistics. Now they're not just leading with statistics, but we're leading with this oh, it has to be trauma, it has to be trauma, it has to be trauma. Is just being okay, is there something else going on besides the yes, that is a factor to what is happening, but maybe there is more. Maybe it is something like high functioning autism. Maybe it's just something they're just frustrated that people are
lacking confidence or haven't been given the language. And I think that's why I'm so an advocate for quality mental health care, and not this. And any cognitive behavioral therapists out there, I love you. But the amount of interns that I went through with only cognitive behavioral was so gaslighting. and trying to take all the things that I was physically going through in foster care and trying to change my behavior when the system around me wasn't changing. And, you know, part of my story is a lot of like covering up in my family, and a lot of like my family was really, you know, well known in our community. So no one knew what was going on, and they were just master manipulators. And so I just felt like throughout school, like, you know, honor roll, like president award, like all these cool things, but yet I'm also having hurricane fits where I'm throwing chairs in the classroom because I can't control this inside of me. And yes, that is trauma and it's triggers, but instead of labeling me and over medicating me with ADHD, why not lead with curiosity? Why not try just, it's so frustrating to hear stories of foster parents. I'll sit in front of somebody and they'll tell me their kids' behavior, and I'll ask like 3 simple questions, like, well, what do your kids love? What makes them lose track of time? What makes them feel safe? And like, they don't know because they're so hard on, you know, controlling the behaviors that are some typically normal kid behaviors.
And foster
and
youth
not
are more over medicated than any other population, because it's just throw medicine at it, throw therapy at it, throw this behavioral class at it, and or modification at it. But you're right, like we're not leading with curiosity to say, is there more happening? And I mean, I struggled with anger issues too, and it was because it was the only emotion that I could recognize that it was like, oh, I'm really angry. But there, you know, as a young adult, I have found the last 10 years that I've actually walked through a therapist with it, because I was like, during COVID, it stemmed back up, and I thought I had it under control. But I told him, I said, my body can't tell the difference between excited and complete anxiety-ridden anxiousness. And I would be responding in an anxiety attack when I would be happy. And so I told him that, and then I was like, I love Disneyland. I love it. I love ice cream. And I had a panic attack over ice cream because I was so excited to get it. And then all of a sudden had an anxiety attack. And so he was like, okay, this is where we need to medicate to help you kind of bring that down, relearn what that is, to give your body a break from fight or flight. But that's where I never learned that. I knew there was sad, mad, and happy, but there is anxious, there is upset, there is anxiety, that is more, there is depression, but even there's burnout. Like there are different emotions that we don't learn because people are like, oh, that's angry, that's this. And I think that happens with depression a lot, is people are like, oh, you're depressed. It's like, no, I'm burned out. like I'm burned out, because that's different. But if we let,
or I feel hopeless in the situation.
I feel hopeless. Like I'm throwing a chair. I don't know what else to do because I need to get this out. And that's where I think sports comes into play with a lot of us. Like a lot of us fires, color guard, football, baseball,
which is so not accessible to a lot of foster youth.
Not at all. And like I was told day one, they were going to pull me out of everything, and then I was just going to come home. So now it's like, now I'm losing the only way I can express myself and find joy and acceptance. And that's where it's like, if we put more of us in these sports, do you think that would help? Absolutely. Because now we can go and be like, you know what? I'm pissed. I'm just going to, you know, if I'm a football player, I'm just going to run into people. Like I'm going to go, you know, I'm going to hit that ball harder if I'm in softball or whatever. But we really do cap it and say like, now sit here in your emotion and let's talk about it. And I'm like, I cry whenever I get mad. And it's not because I'm upset or sad. It's because I'm so angry, I can't find my words. And I'm mad that I can't find how to process here to down here. And so I sit there and just, even to this day. And people are always crazy. So emotional.
There's parts of your brain that actually shut off communication when your lid is flipped, right? So you're in that like fight or flight. There's literally parts of your brain that just turn off. And so it makes sense, right? That your body would go to that cue because you're communicating through your tears, even if your brain can't.
Absolutely. So, and there was, I was doing my trauma-informed certificate, and one of the therapists, or I don't remember his name, but he basically said like that when you are asking a child to regulate their environment, but you're not changing the environment, you don't help them. You hurt them. So he does not advocate for children going to therapy because of the fact that most of the time children in therapy are having to regulate their environment versus asking parents to regulate the environment. So he's like, I'm for family therapy first with the parents, regulate their environment and say, okay, let's create this environment here and see how changes for them. Then we start working with the child to say, okay, how do we help you learn this environment? Because 9 times out of 10, the behavior is solely connected to that environment. And then maybe more biological, and there might be something internal happening. And when he said that, I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
You are asking someone under the age of 18 to regulate their environment, but not change their environment. No wonder, like, I wanted to throw a chair. Love that. Oh, so good. Boom, dropping knowledge.
Man, I feel like we could talk for like 3 hours.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I'll
hopefully I can do this again.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I'm like, yes. I'll close with this last question is, if someone wanted to go where you're the foster parent, speaker, counseling, whatever it might be, if they wanted to do those things, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, absolutely. Get in therapy yourself, do the work, make sure that you have good understanding of being trauma informed, because what you truly believe about yourself and others makes you either a great human or like a harsh human. And I think for me, it's not about what you are passionate about in this field, because if it is there, you'll do great things in this field, either be a foster parent or support. And you don't have to be a foster parent. You can come alongside a foster family and support them, which is almost right now the heroes of the story right now, because so many foster parents are leaving this field because we don't have enough support. Yeah, so just pick up some books, pick up some trainings, listen to your podcast, right? Become a better human. So the overflow of that will be a passion that leads you to create change.
I love that. And it doesn't really matter what direction you go into. This isn't any direction. If you're going to be a speaker, if you're going to be a foster parent or a counselor or a PT, whatever you choose to do, it's important to make sure that you do work through yourself first. And understand that there will be triggers along the way, and that you need to work through. Like, it's not, counseling is not one and done. Trauma is not one and done. It didn't happen tonight, and it's not, usually it's years. It's not going to, be great to just assume that you've already worked through it, you don't need to do it again. Like, I have had moments where I'm like, oh, I need to go talk to somebody real quick. And sometimes that's a friend, my husband, and just being able to actually recognize, like, this really impacted me, and I now know why. And I might be great at self-evaluation, but it always comes down to me second guessing how I feel. And so that's where I have to call that out and say, no, I get to feel this. Like, you attacked me, I get to feel this, versus just
you do.
Oversensitive. No, I get to feel it, and I get to process it.
Come on. So and you get to put people around you that are like-minded. I think it's really hard for some people who've never had experience in foster care come in and say they want to change things, they want to make it better, but there's so much nuance, there's so much that you have to really be in the system and listening to the voices of former foster youth. Really hearing, because I think you touched on the very beginning, like, there's so many diverse experiences and stories that even if you talk to 100 of us, you're still going to learn 100 different things.
Absolutely.
So absolutely. I think
and a lot of the times when someone comes in that has not worked, like, maybe they've worked in foster care, but they have not experienced foster care. I always hear the solution is like, oh, let's bring in some guest speaker who's motivational, that would encourage them to go their direction, or let's create this room that looks like this for them to have an invitation to. But it's like, but no one ever once actually came up and said, hi, Kristen, my name's Denisha. I wanted to get to know you, wanted to take you out for coffee. You do not have to tell me your foster care story. I just want to get to know what you would like to see happen in this environment for foster care kids. And I never once got an invitation like that, ever. And it's like, okay, but the people who did get invited were people who were 20, 30 years past foster care. And they were making the decision. So it's like, you do need to bring in those current foster youth to say, what can we do? How can we make it better? What do you actually want versus someone who left 20 years ago?
Absolutely. I have to brag on North Carolina for a second, because there are some nonprofits that are doing that right now. There's one called Least of These that does like panels. There's one called Say So. And then there's actually one, it's so funny you even get that example, because I was so burnt out on Christian nonprofits. And I had one come up to me that was starting one for aged up foster youth. And I literally said, F you, like, I don't want to talk to any more Christian nonprofits. Like, I'm done, right? And she was like, I want to take you to coffee and I want you to tell me why. And she did. And she listened to me for like 3 or 4 hours on all the ways you could really mess up your ministry to foster youth. and she implemented them. She put around a lot of people. She started slow, and now she has an incredible business that has employed me, the young adults that have lived in my home. They make jewelry. It's called Hope and Vine. It's really cool. Would love for you to link them, but
Absolutely,
just
please.
there are people that are listening, but we need more people like that are going to take it slow, and they're not doing it for the sake of raising money to do more good. They're doing it for the actual change of the individual.
So let's dig into that, because I don't want to just end on be like, cool, great, Christian.
Sorry.
Organizations suck. Can you explain what happens between like you just gave a really good example of an organization doing it right. What is it when they do it wrong? Why does that hurt so much?
Like giving dollar store shampoo to someone that has textured hair, doing things, raising funds, having a lot of overhead in order to pour into things that are not actually changing. Like, where are the nonprofits that are raising funds for extracurriculars, that are raising funds for private counselors, not having to go through Medicaid, making it so that there's quality daycares that kids have access to, or after school care, or summer camps, things that are really going to not only sustain the child towards healing, but the foster family to continue. Because the amount of funds that it takes to even just like license a foster family and the time it takes to pour into them, and then we're losing them within a year. Like, it's just a system that just needs people and nonprofits to recognize in order to prevent those same mistakes happening over and over again.
So instead of using funds for like a big building to showcase this big, beautiful building, sometimes that I've seen, even or rent a building, it's putting the money back into the community. And I know a few that do that very well. I know Treehouse organization does that very well. They're all about bringing community around these young adults and saying like, okay, you don't have family. So what we're going to do is we have a grandparent in the community who wants to be around.
Relational.
Like, oh my gosh, it's all about community, but they're not about like, they have to raise the funding, but it's one of those things that I've seen them pour it back in. And that the difference is like, you really do have to sit down with someone and say, hey, I noticed I said this was your response. Tell me why, so I'm not creating the same thing.
Absolutely.
With Foster Greatness. And one of the best things, and they're here in California, what they do is they actually do the life skills. And it's interesting to me, like I work with a lot of colleges who are putting into play like financial literacy and things like that. But I haven't seen an organization doing that and then saying, okay, businesses, let's intern these foster youth so that way we can get them a resume that looks great, and then have an intern somewhere, and then someone say, hey, I actually want to hire you. Or I want to give a reference to help you get that next job, because that's where there's this.
Absolutely.
And that's incredible to me to think about. Like, there's out of the 20% of foster youth who are actually employed, 50% of them are making a low wage, because most of the time they don't have the skills like Word, PowerPoint, things like that. So if we take that as an organization and say, hey, let's give them a class on this that they don't have to go spend money on. Now they have this, they have a certificate free through Google. Let's walk them through how to use this so that they know how to use in a job.
But also too, like there's one little thing, like when I was homeless, my car tire blowing out blew up my entire life. Like the tiniest thing can take you off. Like if I got and slipped into like a season of depression, I couldn't work. I couldn't it was the hardest thing to navigate on your own. So that relational key is everything. And I know sometimes it can get really messy and it can be like more feel like casework. But at the end of the day, if you can remove the barriers that a child cannot remove themselves, or a young person, like that is what sustains these young adults. Because typically, you would have parents, or you would have some sort of family that would have your back and be that buffer. So relational, absolutely. And I would definitely send me the Treehouse stuff, because I haven't heard of them.
I'll send that over to you. I love following them because they're just doing really good. One of the things too, you touched on that. It's like the tire takes us out, and that we don't have $200 because that's our like 2 paychecks from where we're working. But it takes one person to make a difference. And I remember when I was driving around on a donut, someone from my church was like, that's not safe. And he's like, you need to go get a new tire. And I was like, I'm waiting for my paycheck next month. And he's like, here's the money, go get your tire. I do not want you to get hurt. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. But trying to get the county or the organization that had existed to get the funds needed, they said like, oh, here's all these hoops that you have to jump through in our program, you have to be a part of. It wasn't just a like, where are you going to get your tire done? Okay, cool, let's go and get that done for you. And it was like, that was their whole thing, was to help people in my situation. And then they couldn't even help because I had to jump through like interviews and all this other stuff and making sure using their program, and then they could help me. And I'm like, I get it. I understand red tape. As a foster, we can't, we need things to move faster. It does. Like,
so what you're saying is like less programs, more people. And if your program isn't people, then okay.
I'm gonna start over. And I get it. I get funding and all that stuff is a weird thing, but at the same time too, I think we need to be more people than programs, and more people.
I love that.
I love that.
I love that. That person did that for you.
Absolutely. It was a game changer, because I was going 80 on a donut.
Okay, that's a whole other issue.
I'm fine. Look, I'm still alive. But there's other things like people just don't know that. I didn't know that. I thought I was fine. I was good. I was taking surface streets. We're good. But thank you so much for joining us, and thank you so much for sharing your knowledge. It was so great to hear from you, and definitely we will be talking and doing more in the future. But if you guys want to just make sure you subscribe so that you guys can get access to the videos, that'd be great. But we will see you guys later.
We want to take a moment to thank our sponsor, Foster Greatness. We equip foster youth by connecting communities and empowering individuals on their journey. We provide workforce development, master classes, travel abroad experiences, and individual and community support for foster communities. If you're interested in learning more, please visit fostergreatness.co. Thanks for joining us.